My name is Ken Levine. I'm the general manager, well, president now, I guess, and creative director of Irrational Games. I started Irrational with a couple of partners back in '97. Our first game was a game called System Shock 2, and our fans have sort of been clamoring for many years for something like that. And BioShock is our response to that. So we think of it as a spiritual successor to System Shock 2. And it's a game we wanted to do for a long time. A lot of people came to Irrational to do this kind of game, and a lot of the original Shock 2 team is still here working on this game. BioShock is it's a game about choice. It's an RPG and a shooter combined, set in a failed underwater utopia called Rapture. We've really gone to great lengths to build a place like players have never seen before that has an incredible amount of interactivity. As you saw in the demo, pretty much everything is interactive in the game. You can interact with everything in multiple ways, especially the AI. And I think that's a big step up from a game like Shock 2 or any game you've seen out there, is that one of our key focuses is we have an AI ecology in this game, and your ability to interact with the AI and force them to interact with each other in ways to really exploit them in the environment to get through. But every player is going to play it a different way. Our goal is to make games for strategy where walkthroughs and strategy guides are completely useless. We start the game, there's no cutscene. You just start and you're 20 feet under the ocean water, and you've been in a plane crash, and you see all the wreckage coming down to the water, the tail section of the plane. You come to the surface, and the ocean's on fire, and you see in the distance this a lighthouse, an Art Deco lighthouse with a bathysphere in it that takes you down to the city of Rapture. A bathysphere being a cool Art Deco submersible object. Your first goal is to stay alive and get out. That's your first feeling. But as you move through the world, you start learning more about what's going on because you don't know anything about it. I mean, all of a sudden you're in this Art Deco underwater utopia that nobody even knew existed. And so in order to survive, you need to figure out what's going on and maybe make some friends. You certainly make some enemies. And it's a game of exploration, a game of combat, a game of choice. I think it's like, imagine a game like Oblivion, where it's all, again, open-ended about choice, but a little more focused, a little more content, depth of content, a little bit less. There's almost every room is different. There's no reuse space really in BioShock. Every space is its own thing, very custom crafted, it's like an old world version of that. But fear is a big element in System Shock 2, which I regard as one of the scariest games of all time. So like a tighter, more focused, scarier Oblivion with a heavy focus on interacting with the AIs in the world. There's several major sort of classes of characters. You have the splicers, who are sort of your more traditional enemies in the world, who are people just like you who mutated themselves, because genetic mutation is one of the key technologies that evolved down in Rapture, way ahead of the regular world. And they've mutated themselves to stay alive when all the conflict started in this underwater city. And they as they mutated themselves, became more physically monstrous, and their minds started to go. So these sort of superpowered, insane individuals wandering the halls of Rapture. Then there's the big daddies and the little sisters. Now the big daddies are these sort of big, hulking, genetically modified guys in these almost like these deep sea diver suits. And they go around the world searching for these vents to knock on. And they knock on these vents, and living in these vents are the little sisters. Little sisters are children, and their job is like Dickensian urchins almost, to go around the world and find dead bodies to recycle genetic material from, called Adam. And the big daddies protect them. And they just go about in the world, and that's one of the great things about BioShock, is these AIs are just doing their thing, going around the world doing their thing. And if you don't bother the big daddies and little sisters, they won't bother you. But if you bother them, watch out for the big daddies, because they're tough. And a key thing we're working on in this game is to sell the relationship between them. And you really see almost like a creepy paternalistic relationship between, father-daughter relationship between them. And you can actually use plasmids later in the game that put you in one of those roles, where the little sister thinks you're the big daddy, and the big daddy thinks you're the little sister, and is protecting you. So we really spending a lot of research on making that a meaningful relationship in this game. And it's something you haven't seen in first-person shooters, really. The core interface plays like a first-person shooter, but there's the RPG in the game of character growth. I think we want to focus a lot of the RPG stuff in the world. There are machines to hack, there are things to craft, there are security systems to take control of. There's also your character to grow. But I think that it is more action-oriented than a traditional RPG, but there's also an incredible amount of depth there. You know, I mean, I don't think it's that uncommon. You have a game like Diablo, which is it's not much like Diablo specifically, but it's very action-oriented, or even, WoW is pretty fast-moving and action-oriented. But, it gives also, if you just want to play it as a shooter, it really gives you an amazing shooter experience. I mean, just the weapon system. We have 9 modifiable weapons that, if you think of all the modifications, there's several hundred variations of weapons in the game, plus different ammo types for those weapons. But I think most people like to play a little bit of mix, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of RPG, but it does all those things very well. It's all powered by the Unreal 3 engine, which really gives us a nice start. The puzzle, it's not so much, like I showed you some examples in the demo, it's not so much puzzles we set, it's tactical situations that the player has to use his powers cleverly to get through. Like we show, you had a situation where you had a plasmid and you had a splicer guarding a place you need to get to, and you saw a big daddy and a little sister walking together. Now, a player who specialized in weapons would go in their guns blazing, shoot everybody up, take all their resources, etc. But we were playing a little different character there, and so we did do some clever things. We used a aggressor irritant on the big daddy, and then when the splicer saw the big daddy, thought that the big daddy was her enemy and went after them and used the situation to get around them and head into the record store. And I think that's key. That we do have puzzles in the game, but puzzles are interesting, but I'd rather have sort of organic puzzles that come out of the space, because all the spawning, like you saw all the dead bodies that the little sisters go to, those are they do that dynamically in the world. And when you kill an enemy, they'll come out of their vent and go to that enemy. So we don't have a lot of control over what happens in the world. The world does, and the player does. And so I'm less interested in setting up specific A, B, C, D puzzles, and more about emergent tactical puzzles that happen in the world. Plasmids are really much like the psi powers in Shock 2. They're the spells, the RPG powers that you have, and you can use them to enhance your weapons. You can use them to enhance your hacking ability. You can hack into all these machines. And when we say hack, we don't mean like high-tech hacking. We mean like going in there with your screwdriver. It's all analog, and replacing gears and doing all this cool stuff. You can use it to almost like psionic powers, like casting fireballs even, and telekinetic powers. So it's really that whole slate of extraordinary powers you can add through genetics. What's our first console title? So I think, one great thing about being acquired by 2K is now we have we have a large enough staff to have a tech team, and I think we were so cautious about going to the console from a technical standpoint that we almost were overcautious. So by the time we got there, we were so well prepared, and I think the console was pretty robust. And I think a lot of people said this was one of the best looking games of the show, and a lot of that's because we've been able to. Or normally when we had worked on games before, it was like, well, here's a goal I want. Like I said, I want we have all these great water effects. We don't just want water effects because we thought we could do water effects. We wanted to have a feeling that the city was being drowned by the ocean. And so now, as a designer, when I say I like to have the feeling the city is being drowned by the ocean, we have a path to get there that's less encumbered than it used to be, and it opens up doors for us in terms of. I want this relationship between the big daddy and the little sister, and immediate animation and physics and all those things that require resources that the older machines didn't have. And we're really getting to the stage right now, more where it's getting like the camera, where the camera is a tool that you know how to use, and it's not like, oh, can the camera do this? It's more like, well, we can do this stuff. We're becoming more bound by our imagination than by our technology. We will be using achievements. We're not talking about any Xbox Live stuff right now, but I'm a big fan of little stroking the player, little rewards. I love the achievement stuff, and we'll certainly use those. And we haven't announced anything else right now.